If you grow up in a military family, choice is an illusion. My grandfather served in the Second World War, my father in Vietnam. We were raised on stories of courage and sacrifice, on mottos about freedom and duty. We bled red, white, and blue long before any of us understood what that actually meant. I no longer share those views without question, but the past is stubborn. By my junior year of high school, I had enlisted, getting basic training out of the way during the summer between junior and senior year. It was the late 2000s and early 2010s, an era when the American military seemed determined to scatter its people across every continent. Germany first, then Guam, and finally Japan. They sent me to Kagawa Prefecture. It was disarmingly pleasant. The city offered easy access to the mountains. Hiking took only a short train ride. On days off, I would disappear with friends into the greenery, come back exhausted and strangely peaceful. The city itself was modest but comfortable. The food, however, was revelatory. Everything tasted fresh and precise, as though someone had sharpened the concept of food itself. Returning to American meals later felt like going back to field rations. Blunt, heavy, and indifferent. It was cheap, too. You could eat well without thinking of it as a luxury. Japan, I thought, was as close to civilized living as I would ever get in uniform. Then the sun went down. A few of the local staff on base pulled me aside early on and offered advice in a tone that was half joking, half grave. Strange things sometimes happened at night, they said. If I encountered anything odd, I was to behave as normally as possible. No panic, no dramatics. And, they added, I should visit a shrine and make an offering. It helped. I filed it away in the mental drawer labeled local folklore and forgot it. For 2 weeks. In my mid-20s, I was not yet finished with my foolishness. A group of us arranged a night out at a karaoke bar. If you haven't experienced one in Japan, you pay for a private room, a machine, and usually, essentially, unlimited alcohol. You and your friends massacre songs at full volume, convinced you're channeling Freddie Mercury while producing something closer to Yoko Ono in distress. We sang until nearly 1:30 in the morning, drunk enough that gravity felt negotiable. Some wanted food. The city is full of all-night places. I was too tired to care and decided to head back to my small off-base apartment. The train system makes it absurdly easy to traverse the city in any state short of unconscious. A couple of line changes, and I stepped out at the station closest to my housing, just a few blocks to walk. Normally, half an hour, in my condition, more. It was on a dark, almost empty street that I saw the figure, small, 10 meters ahead, back turned to me, bald head, draped in what looked like a monk's robe. My first thought, a child, perhaps from a nearby temple. America trains you to distrust anyone on the street at night. Japan does not. Children there ride trains alone, run errands, walk unaccompanied. Bad things still happen, of course, but not with the same feral edge. So instead of crossing the road or tightening my grip on my wallet, I felt concern. A child, alone at 2 a.m. There was a police box down the road. I decided I would at least ask if he was lost. As I approached, the nearby streetlight flickered and cut out altogether, plunging the road into darkness. In that blackness, I saw a small blue light in the figure's hand, like a faint will-o'-the-wisp. "Hey," I called too loudly in English. "You lost? Need help?" No reaction. Then I remembered where I was and tried again, dragging my broken Japanese through a still thick southern Georgia accent. "Kimi wa mayoi, lost, ushinata, uchi, doko." It was barely coherent, but it was something. The child turned. The blue light brightened, revealing a face that, at first glance, could have been any child's. Nose, mouth, cheeks, but instead of 2 eyes, there was one. A single enormous eye in the center of the face, round and glossy. That eye stared into me. My brain screamed at my legs to run. My legs refused. It was as though something had reached inside and flipped a switch, everything disconnected. My knees buckled and I collapsed, arms catching my fall just enough to keep my skull from the pavement. I could not move. I could not even turn my head away. The little figure shuffled towards me, the blue light growing oppressively brighter. When it reached me, it leaned down, head tilting, examining me with that single unblinking eye. Then it licked me. The tongue dragged from my cheek to my temple. It was rough and scaly with small barbs that scraped my skin. I had shaved that morning. The exposed skin made every millimeter worse. It felt like a cat's tongue that had been designed by someone who disliked humans. It was also slimy, an unpleasant combination. The thing straightened, regarded me again with faint indifference, and turned away. It simply walked off into the darkness, blue light shrinking, then vanishing. After a few minutes, sensation returned to my limbs. I staggered home, wiping my face until the skin burned. Sleep was not an option. The memory of that tongue seemed embedded in my nerves. The next morning, I must have looked as though I'd crawled out of a grave. I sat in the mess hall, stirring my soup into spirals and staring through it. "Y'all right, man?" one of the guys from karaoke asked. "Looks like you've seen a ghost." I hesitated. "I might have," I said. It sounded absurd out loud. Rue, a Japanese civilian who worked on base, had been half asleep over his tray nearby. At that, his eyes snapped open. "Who did you run into?" he asked, voice suddenly alert. I described it. Kid-sized, bald, monk's robe, small blue light, one single massive eye, paralysis, the lick. By the time I finished, Rue was laughing, not mockingly, but with something like relief. "You got lucky," he said. "Hitotsume Kozo, Cyclops' child, harmless, strange," he added, smirking, "but harmless, usually." Matt, one of the other soldiers, pulled a face. "Harmless? Getting licked by a one-eyed dwarf doesn't sound harmless?" Rue shrugged. "Could have been worse. Some yokai you meet once, and that is it for you." He turned serious. "You've heard of Kuchisake Onna?" Matt shook his head. "Nope, and I don't like the sound of it." Rue continued anyway. "There was an airman here 2-3 years ago. Official report said suicide. Mouth slit from one ear to the other, like this." Rue traced a line with his hand from ear, down across his mouth, up to the other ear. "Locals know it was Kuchisake Onna, slit-mouthed woman." Matt grimaced. "How does that work exactly?" Rue leaned in. "She appears at night. Older school stories say she wears a mask. These days," he added dryly, "it could be a scarf, a fan, anything that hides the lower face. She stops you and asks, 'Am I pretty?'" "And what's the correct answer?" I asked. "You cannot run," Rue said. "Running means you call her ugly. She kills you. So you say, 'Yes, you are pretty.' Then she shows you her mouth. Cuts from here," he gestured again, grotesquely, "to here. Then she asks again, 'Am I still pretty?' And then," Matt said, "if you say no, she kills you with huge scissors. If you say yes, she makes you like her. Slices your mouth." Matt grimaced. "So we're screwed either way. That's comforting." "The only chance," Rue said, "is confusion. Many yokai, her, others, if you answer their question with a question, they stop. They think. That is your time to run. You must not panic. You must be clever." He looked at us both as if he were issuing a formal order. "And if you have met one already," he added, glancing at me, "you should go to a shrine, make an offering. Most yokai are restless spirits. A little respect. It can make them ignore you or give you enough luck to survive." We talked a little longer. Rue listed other creatures, some simply annoying, others genuinely lethal. He made the world outside the base sound like a place where the map was crowded with warnings. Here there be things. I intended to visit a shrine. Work had other ideas. The following week swallowed me. Extra duties, sudden tasks, rotating shifts. It is surprisingly easy to misplace memories in such conditions. By the end of that week, I had almost persuaded myself that I'd been drunk, that I'd exaggerated, that perhaps I'd been licked by some deranged human. The brain prefers mundane explanations. I should have gone to the shrine. I did not. A few days later, I had a night off at last. I met up with Hikaru, the girl I'd been seeing since not long after my first encounter, a quiet, kind woman whose patience extended to my broken Japanese. We walked through a park at sunset, talked, ate, and drank a little, nothing wild. By the time I walked her home, it was past midnight. I started back towards base on foot, sober for once. A block from her house, I heard my name. Thomas. Her voice? I turned eagerly, half expecting her to invite me back in. It was not Hikaru. A tall woman stood a few meters away. Long hair fell in glossy waves around her face. She wore an elegant kimono that reached to her feet, and she held a paper fan up over the lower half of her face. Her eyes were very large, very green, and unnaturally bright in the dark. "Am I pretty?" she asked. Every instinct urged me to run. Rue's voice overrode it. "Do not run. Answer. Confuse." "Yes," I said. "You're very pretty." She giggled. The eyes brightened, delighted. The fan began to close, slowly, like a curtain being drawn back. The thin wooden ribs of the fan lengthened, sharpened, glinting under a streetlight that seemed suddenly too white. They locked into place as the blades of an enormous pair of scissors. Her smile appeared, not a normal smile. Her mouth was cut from ear to ear, the skin pulled back, the lips cleaved open. Fresh blood glistened at the edges as if the wound had been made minutes earlier. "Am I still pretty?" she asked again. My mind, which had been frantically sorting through Rue's advice, seized up. Instead of producing a clever riddle or an oblique question, it simply echoed hers. "Am I pretty?" I blurted. "Idiotic?" I squeezed my eyes shut, braced for the sound of scissors and the flaring pain of a cut from ear to ear. A morbid thought flitted through. God, what a way to die. "Are you pretty?" she repeated. When I dared open my eyes, her expression was no longer fixed on me. The enormous smile had twisted in the middle into a confused frown. Blood trickled from the slits as her brow furrowed. "Are you pretty? Are men pretty?" She looked up at the sky as if contemplating some profound philosophical question. The moment her gaze broke from mine, something released inside me. I turned and ran, no pretense, no dignity, until I reached the base gate. The guards nearly refused to let me in simply because I looked so frightened. The next morning I called in sick with food poisoning. Then I walked very deliberately to the nearest shrine, put in 2 offerings instead of 1, and bowed so deeply that my back hurt. If there were rules to this place, I intended to obey them. After that, I became a student of yokai. On base, I did my assigned work. Off base, I read. I learned that some creatures could be confused, others appeased, and some avoided entirely. I also learned that some did not care about offerings, rules, or bargains. They were pure malice given shape. I adjusted my habits. I tried to be home before midnight. I stayed in well-lit, populated areas when I could. I continued to meet Hiroku, and we began to spend most of my free time together. For a while, it seemed to help. For a while. It was around October when the next incident occurred. Hikaru and I had been on a quiet date, dinner, a walk through a park at dusk, conversations that felt strangely easy. My Japanese was improving. I could string sentences together without embarrassing both of us. I walked her home, kissed her goodnight, and headed to the nearest subway station to return to base. The platform was almost deserted. The arrival board announced 10 minutes until the next train. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering occasionally in that way that makes one feel both sleepy and vaguely uneasy. I sat on a bench. At some point, my eyes closed. A scraping sound woke me. I thought at first that it was the train arriving ahead of schedule, but the board still read 5 minutes. The sound continued. Metal on stone dragged irregularly as though something fragile and hard were being pulled across rock. I rose, approached the edge of the platform, and leaned over, wary but curious. If someone had fallen onto the tracks, I would need to call for help. It's not unheard of. Drunken accidents, suicides, ugly but human. The scraping intensified, becoming louder, faster. Hands appeared pale, bloody, gripping the edge of the platform. Long fingernails rasped against the cement. Then came the hair, long, black, matted, rising like something from a well. She pulled herself up. From the waist up, she was a girl, or had been once. Wet hair clinging to her face, eyes dark and empty, mouth open in a silent scream. Below the abdomen, there was nothing but torn flesh and jagged bone. Her spine and ribs jutted out, slick with fresh blood. Those bones dragged against the cement with each movement, creating that unbearable scraping sound. She began to crawl toward me, using her elbows and hands. The exposed bones bounced and grated, leaving a smeared trail of blood behind her. Every horror film I'd ever seen flashed through my mind. The Ring, The Grudge, cheap imitations of something that now crawled toward me with malicious intent. I turned and ran down the platform. The scraping grew faster. She was gaining. There is nothing more unnerving than realizing that something with no legs can outpace you. I aimed for the stairs, an instinctive hope that height and railings might slow her. They did not. Midway up, I glanced back. A new sound had joined the scraping. Metallic, ringing. She had produced a huge scythe, which she held in one hand while using the other to propel herself forward, bones slamming against each step as she climbed. Her face was clearer now, a mask of frozen pain and hatred, eyes drowned in black. I tried to leap several steps at once, trusting to adrenaline. Miraculously, I cleared the first few. Her swing missed my ankles by inches. Then I tripped. My foot caught on a step. I pitched forward. My face slammed into concrete. Pain exploded in my nose. Warm blood poured out, filling my mouth with the taste of iron. I tried to get up. My body refused. The world blurred. Behind me, the scraping slowed, each clatter of bone against stone punctuated by a wet thud as her exposed inside smacked the steps and smeared blood upward. She dragged herself closer. We made eye contact. Something invaded my mind, not a thought, but a memory that was not mine. I was no longer on the stairs. I was her. I saw children pointing, laughing, heard the words, unwanted, useless, stupid, an orphanage, teachers scolding in front of the class, classmates snickering, a long grinding humiliation. Why are you even here? No one wants you. You will never contribute anything. Then the platform, the train, the single light on the front of it glowed warm and inviting, not threatening. I walked toward the edge, numb. The horn blared, but it was too late. I stepped off and was hit with a force that shattered everything. Then I was back on the stairs. My nose still bleeding, my head ringing. The real train screeched into the station, doors sliding open. She was gone. There was no blood on the stairs, no dragging trail, no bones. Just the grinding of the train's brakes and the normal metallic squeal of wheels on track. I did not wait. I ran into the nearest carriage, pushing past passengers who gasped and recoiled at the sight of my blood-covered face. I sat heavily, still shaking. There was only one other person in the car with me. A young man, casually dressed, wore a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He glanced at me occasionally, with what looked less like fear and more like weary recognition. Twice, I was sure I caught the hint of a smile. We reached my station. He exited ahead of me. Outside the gates, I saw him again a few paces ahead. He turned, whistled softly at me, gave a small wave, and vanished, simply gone, leaving a wisp of vapor that hung for a second in the air. Something small scampered where he had stood, a creature that, in America, I would have mistaken for a raccoon. Here, I couldn't quite place it. Months later, in the mountains, I would. On a later hike with Hikaru, we walked a forest path away from our campsite for some private time. A small family of animals burst out of the brush ahead of us, 3 raccoon-like creatures with expressive faces and rounded bellies. They stopped, stared at us with bright eyes, and then scampered back into the trees. Hikaru let out a delighted squeal. "Tanuki," she said, almost bouncing. She explained, quickly and happily, that they were sometimes considered legendary, shapeshifters and tricksters, and that seeing them was rare. Mischievous, yes, but said to be lucky. I remembered the young man in the cap, his disappearance, the creature that ran where he had been. I wondered, not entirely rationally, if I'd been the recipient of a tanuki's protection on that subway platform. After what I'd seen, rationality felt increasingly overrated. Summers in the Kagawa Mountains are extraordinarily pleasant. They are also, I discovered, extraordinary places to meet things that should not exist. We planned a weekend camping trip. Hikaru, Matt, myself, and a newly arrived soldier named Jacob. We arranged leave, packed cooking supplies, tents, and, inevitably, more alcohol than was wise. I had begun to think seriously about my life after service. I wanted out, a cushy private sector job, something that used my skills without using my body as collateral. I liked Hikaru more than I wanted to admit. I had even entertained the idea of asking, not for marriage, but for something almost as serious. Whether she would come back to the States with me, or whether I should consider staying in Japan. We parked off the side of a mountain road and started along the trail to the campsite. On the way, we passed a small Shinto shrine tucked among the trees. Its lantern was unlit, but the place had that still, dense feeling that shrines often do, as though the air thickened at the threshold. Hikaru and I stepped inside, bowed, clapped, and made a small offering to the local kami. Matt followed awkwardly, performing the motions with the air of someone obeying protocol or indulging a superstition he didn't quite believe. Jacob snorted. "I don't believe in all that hocus-pocus crap," he said, loud enough for the trees to hear. "Waste of time." It was the first mistake of the weekend, not the last. At the campsite, he confirmed himself as a first-class nuisance. He tore into our shared food supplies, opened 3 different snacks in rapid succession, and casually tossed each wrapper aside into the underbrush when he was done. When Hikaru and I suggested he at least pile them up for later disposal, he rolled his eyes. "Nature'll take care of it," he said. When we were far enough away, Hikaru murmured, "He's kind of annoying." "You're telling me," I replied. At this rate, Matt might just leave him in the woods. We walked back along the path we'd taken, quietly picking up every bit of trash Jacob had thrown. At the roadside, we found a bin and sorted what we could into recycling. It felt less like environmentalism and more like an apology. Back at camp, Matt was erecting his tent with the tight jaw of a man who wanted to say several things and was wisely saying none. Jacob had emptied his own pack all over the clearing, scattering supplies with no intention of organizing them. Eventually, Matt dragged Jacob off to the river with a pair of fishing poles. Hikaru and I stayed behind. We readied the fire, arranged the rest of the supplies, and set up our own tent. Later, as dusk deepened, we lay in the tent together, talking in low voices, content. Then Matt's voice shattered the calm. "Go! We have to go!" he bellowed, crashing through the trees, tearing into the clearing and straight into our tent flap without ceremony. Jacob barreled in behind him, shrieking, tripping over the mess he'd created earlier and crashing onto his face. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I snapped, scrambling out of the tent. Matt pointed with a trembling hand toward the tree line where they'd come from. I heard it before I saw it, rattling. Not one sound, but thousands, a storm of bones colliding, heavy thumps as though something massive pulled itself along the ground. The trees shook visibly at the edge of the clearing. Then it emerged. A giant skeleton, taller than the surrounding trees. But its bones were not singular. Its entire form was made of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of smaller skeletons fused together. Skulls grinned from every angle, packed into ribs and hips and arms. Every mouth hung open in a silent or perhaps perpetual scream. It dragged itself forward, fingers gouging the earth. Every step, every movement made those fused bones clatter against each other in a deafening cascade. We ran. Hikaru grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the path back to the road. The weight of footsteps behind us shook the ground. The rattling grew louder. The thing was faster than it looked. I was not a sprinter at the best of times. In the dark, on uneven ground, with branches whipping my face and lungs burning, I was worse. Jacob screamed constantly somewhere behind us. Matt was in front, clutching something in one hand that glinted when moonlight caught it. "The keys," I yelled, remembering. "Who's got the keys?" "I got 'em," Matt shouted back. "Just run!" The lantern at the little shrine ahead glowed in the darkness. Someone had lit it since we'd passed earlier. It was the only source of real hope in the forest. "Shrine," Hikaru gasped. "Get inside." We hit the steps at full speed. Matt reached the doorway first and stumbled inside. Hikaru dragged me in behind her with more strength than I would have thought possible, pushing me so hard I nearly slammed into the back wall. Jacob tripped on the top step, sprawled face first across the threshold. We turned just in time to see him try to haul himself in. He could not cross. Some invisible barrier held him exactly at the border of the doorway. His hands scrabbled at the wood. He screamed for help, voice cracking. The Gashadokuro reached us, one enormous skeletal hand thrust forward. Two long bony fingers speared straight through Jacob's torso as though he were made of paper. He jerked once, still pleading, then went limp. The monster lifted him, brought him to one of its many skull mouths, and bit down. He disappeared like a sweet. We screamed, Hikaru, Matt, and I, pressing back into the tiny shrine until wood dug into our shoulders. The creature tried to push its hand through the doorway. As soon as its bones crossed the threshold, a flash of light blasted them backward. It recoiled with a sound like 1,000 bones being shaken in a barrel. It could not enter. We were safe, technically, trapped, practically. Gashadokuro, Hikaru whispered, breathless. They cannot be killed. We just have to wait, hope it grows bored. The monster settled outside on the path, looming over the shrine. Its many skulls all turned toward the doorway. Hundreds of toothy grins watched us with empty sockets. It breathed. The stench of death rolled into the shrine, thick, hot, suffocating. We gagged. Matt collapsed into a corner, sobbing, begging any god listening to save him. The Gashadokuro grew impatient. One massive arm rose into the air, bones rattling. It was about to simply smash the shrine flat. We clung to each other, waiting for the impact that would crush us. The impact came, but not as expected. There was a thunderous crash beside the shrine. The whole structure shook. The Gashadokuro screamed, that rasping, many-mouthed shriek, and then the rattling changed direction, receding down the path, growing fainter and fainter until it disappeared. When I opened my eyes, something else stood in front of the shrine. A tall figure, red-skinned, with a long, sharp nose and small wings folded at its back. A huge paper fan rested in one hand. The other held the severed skeletal arm of the giant, as though it were nothing more than an oversized branch. A tengu. Kami, Hikaru whispered beside me, awe softening her terror. A guardian deity. The tengu glanced once toward the shrine, as if to confirm that we were intact, then raised his fan. A gust of wind swept through the trees. When it passed, he was gone, taking the arm with him. Only the crushed earth and lingering smell of death remained. We stayed in the shrine longer than necessary, waiting for our bodies to accept that we were, for the moment, still alive. Then we walked back to the car in silence. No one needed to say we were leaving. We left. Explaining any of this to command was impossible. Matt and I composed a version of events on the drive back. Jacob had been drinking heavily, had become angry after Matt confronted him, had stormed off alone into the woods. We'd searched, failed to find him, and returned to report it. It wasn't even entirely untrue, it just omitted the part where a giant skeletal horror popped him like a snack. Local authorities mounted a search and rescue operation. They found his fishing rod by the stream, nothing else. No body, no footprints beyond a certain point, no answers. Matt did not cope well. He had been raised a devout Christian. Meeting a one-eyed child or a scissor-wielding ghost is one thing. Watching a 1,000-boned monster devour a man while a red-skinned winged figure intervenes is something else. He began drinking more, sleeping less. Eventually, he received a medical discharge on psychiatric grounds. I don't know where he went. I often wonder if he hears rattling in every creak of the house. Hikaru and I, for our part, tried for a while to pretend that our relationship existed in a world unconnected to shrines and giants and ghosts. We even briefly discussed the idea of moving to another prefecture after my deployment, starting somewhere new. But Japan is Japan. The mountains are the same mountains. Her family rooted her there. My time in uniform was ending, and with it, my stay. We broke up cleanly, like adults. She stayed, I left. Back in America, there are no Gashadokuro on the roads, no Hitotsume Kozo licking cheeks on quiet streets. There are, however, plenty of shadows. Sometimes, at night, a scraping sound in a hallway or on a window will send me bolt upright, heart pounding, convinced that a half-girl is dragging herself toward my door, or that a giant bone hand is reaching up over the edge of my bed. I cannot stand the sound of metal dragged on concrete. I still dream of that tongue on my cheek. I began leaving small offerings here too, not in proper shrines because there aren't any, but under certain trees by streams in odd corners that feel watched. A coin, a little food, a murmured apology. I have no idea whether it matters here, but it does something for my nerves. In time, Hikaru and I reconnected online, tentative at first, then warmer. 10 years can turn a romance into something quieter. Fondness, curiosity, shared memories of insane nights neither of us can explain to anyone else. She has talked about visiting the United States, seeing where I grew up, meeting American ghosts, she jokes. Sometimes I wonder if the luck of that tanuki, if that is indeed what it was, still follows me. Sometimes I wonder whether the things in Kagawa remember me at all, or whether, somewhere in the dark, they are still turning over my face in their minds, just as I turn over theirs.